Welcome back, everyone. We have two more very exciting presentations on two additional models before wrapping up the course. And with a slight modification to the agenda, we will go straight from hearing these last two speakers to session 2, which will just be a brief discussion on how we propose to follow up with the country participants after the workshop. So there will be no additional breaks. And with that, I am delighted to reintroduce Mario Tat, whom we had the pleasure of meeting on day 1. Mario has over 20 years of experience in energy systems modeling, simulation analysis, and long-term expansion strategies. And he has been with IAEA's Planning and Economic Studies section for the past 12 years, providing extensive support in implementing long-term energy system models and capacity building in numerous countries. And today he will present on message. So Mario, please go ahead and unmute yourself and begin sharing your screen when you are ready.
Thanks, Clarice, for this introduction. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
And I wish good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants. I have to admit, when we were preparing this workshop, I somehow accepted this challenge or task to present IAEA's tool message and its potential use to model long-term, low-carbon, net zero future. And as this workshop approached, I also had a difficulty how to approach this, most probably because of the nature of our program at the agency, which is mainly focused on provision of tools for capacity building. So I would say that most probably my presentation will have a bit different note compared to two excellent presentations that we had a chance to see today. And I also believe that the following speaker will model his presentation in a bit different way. Second challenge that I had was about net zero future. So for me, net zero future and all these modeling efforts, energy planning efforts are just a special subset of general energy planning exercise. In a sense that we see all these elements that are bothering all energy analysts and planners. So we have a multiple and often conflicting objectives. We have ever-changing environment in terms of options that exist, in terms of costs of technologies, policies that are constantly changing or new policies are designed. We are looking into a big system, energy system with many fuels and technology, variety of technologies, which is investment intensive, where all technologies are coming with very long lifetimes, and at the same time, uncertainty of present actions and present happenings, and as well as future horizons is also very high. So we want to evaluate these long-term outcomes, achieve long-term objectives, conclude how we could achieve them. At the same time, we have to take into account some short and medium-term challenges and issues so that development paths that we identify and develop are, let's say, capturing all these important elements, because whatever we decide today, whichever technology we put in the system today, this technology will stay for a long time around us. And we want to avoid this lock-in into unsustainable alternatives. So one of the tools that can be used for this type of analysis is message, or model for energy supply system alternatives and their general environmental impacts. This model has a very long history. It was developed in 1970s. It was formally developed by International Institute for Applied System Analysis, IASA, and it was improved, enhanced, expanded during several decades. In year 2000, the IAEA colleagues that worked at that time here in this house acquired message under special agreement with EASA, with idea to introduce model for capacity building. That required further changes, enhancements, and addition of a user interface to facilitate application of this tool in capacity building programs, and especially in developing countries. So we really needed something that is easily manageable on the user side. And here I have to make a distinction. So I will be talking about message international version that we are distributing as part of our capacity building program, while EASA continues to develop message, and currently they are running another version of message under different platform, and this message is referred to as message IX. But in terms of functionalities, I would say all functionalities in these two models are, or modeling frameworks are the same, or at least similar, but there is a difference in a sense that EASA offers also ready-to-use models. In fact, they are also working on, let's say, case studies with data sets, while because of the nature of our program, we are leaving data ownership and data preparation to countries. Of course, we support them in this, but as agency, we are not offering ready-to-use national or regional or global case studies. If we are looking to the history of use of message, we can see that message software has been applied consistently for various global or regional, as well as national and local types of analysis. Currently, we are also participating in a project in which we cooperate with IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency in Africa, and this is maybe the most important project in which we are now contributing. We are contributing as so-called modeling partners for development of continental power system master plan for Africa. So idea is to create a regional model, African continental model, that will be able to simultaneously look into generation and interconnection options across the African continent. For this, IRENA has developed SPLAT model, which behind uses message modeling framework. And in that effort, IRENA proposed this starting kit, starting data kit that can help relatively easily start analysis of the most important aspects of joint operation of power system in African context. If we look at message main features, I would say message is a tool that's if we just look at the two previous tools that were presented, message goes along times tool. So it is a system engineering optimization modeling framework that can be used to model medium to long-term development of energy systems, related climate policies, offers scenario approach platform, and it can be applied from really local systems at the level of cities to national regions, countries to global subregions and regions. In its structure, the message version that we are offering is quite flexible. So almost all components of the message, as we are offering it, are flexible and customizable. So that means that user is free to select any planning horizon that can be with any resolution in terms of maybe annual resolution or multi-annual modeling steps. In each year can be divided into different time slices. Demand is exogenously provided. Level of this demand can also be different. It can be final or useful demand end users. It offers detailed representation, so one uniform concept of representation of various processes and technologies. And it's capable not to work only with energy forms, but we can interpret these flows and in also as other flows or other commodities, where commodities are produced, converted, transported, stored, and used finally. It is up to users to define desired level of details based on the targets of the analysis. We offer a tool free of charge for the IAEA's member states, and we offer tailor-made training, capacity building, and continuous support. As I said, the software does not come with data sets. It comes with so-called demonstration case, which is used for training purposes. And then during capacity building, we are working with national teams to collect and prepare data for modeling in message framework. It also comes with a free solver, and there is also option to use commercial solver with these tools. And in some cases, we help countries acquire these commercial solvers, especially if they are looking into very complicated case studies that do require deployment of commercial solvers. So what message can do, how message can help? So as it was presented in the previous times presentation, so for each set of assumptions, input data, constraints, for any definition of any scenario storyline inside the model, message calculates the least cost energy supply system by establishing linear programming or mixed integer programming problem. In that sense, message is helpful in assessing various investment plans to achieve the least cost energy supply system. But here I would like to emphasize that this single plan, this single solution of message is not the ultimate targets of analysis. Target of analysis is that we understand how system is behaving and identify robust solutions and robust choices and support those decisions, immediate decisions or medium-term decisions that will support our long-term targets. Also, for a given investment plans, we can assess implications in terms of economic, environmental parameters. We can compare technologies, we can compare different policies, and we can see how those policies are developing over time. We also have to be aware what message cannot do, as it was presented yesterday by Todd. So message is not there to predict the future, but to give us a sense how future might unfold under certain conditions. Message cannot make decisions instead of us. It can provide us insight, as it was emphasized by previous speakers also, how to decide among different options. So it can be used for relative comparison of different decisions. And of course, message cannot implement plans, but it can give us information if we implement plan correctly, what are the positive outcomes, or if we do not implement plans, what are maybe negative outcomes or additional challenges that we are putting in front of our energy system and in general societies. Message data or workflow is very similar to what was presented in times. So we have inputs that are structure of our energy system. We refer to it as reference energy system or energy chain or energy network. We have to provide energy demand projections. So those are exogenous to message model. We provide description of available technologies today, in the future, and also resources with all technical economic parameters. And we can also introduce various types of relations or constraints to reflect various policies that are targeting either technologies, environmental protection, or maybe some economic constraints. Of course, these data are collected through various sources. When we are implementing our capacity building programs, preparation of input data is one of very demanding activities. And I also have to say here that we are not offering just message as a single tool to answer questions about needed energy policies in a country, in an area. We are also running other parts of the training, which are focused on estimations, assessment of energy demand. So for this, we also have separate tools, as well to consider some other elements like financing options and competitiveness of various technologies in the future. The main outputs of message are capacity and generation mix, so how much installed power, not just in the power system, but across all energy conversion or producing technologies, how much fuel or resources we are using, how much money we have to invest, how much money we have to pay for maintenance of the systems, for fuels, what will be emissions, what will be environmental impacts, and we can also take into account some other impacts like land and water use, and also these interdependencies that exist among various categories like climate, land, water, and energy. So how our analysis starts? So we are first facing energy system, which is a real system, but then we have to, let's say, reduce this energy system to a model, to a case study that is capable to answer our questions. So all these technologies, there could be cars, light bulbs, industrial facilities, hydropower plants, storages, transmission lines. We have to combine this into a single model. And in message, this is done through so-called reference energy system, which is a model representation of our real energy system. At the beginning, we have to put our questions forward, and based on these questions, we can design appropriate reference energy system. Reference energy system is a network of energy forms or other commodities and connections among those. Connections among energy forms are introduced through technologies and storages. And with these two elements, energy forms or commodities and technologies or processes, we can practically represent any energy system as well as connection with some other subsystems. This energy network, this reference energy system is completely up to the user. So user can define whichever form of energy, whichever commodity, and whichever technology is needed to picture current energy system, so things that we have in the system, and also things that might be needed in the future. And we've seen that for net zero future, we might need technologies that, as it is often said, that we even do not know that they exist. So we have to also be a bit imaginative. Obviously, there is a great deal of these emissions that we still do not know how to handle. And the next couple of slides, I will try to just mention most important elements of a case study that is designed in message. We have so-called modeling periods or modeling years and time slices. Time slices refer to division of year into different time chunks. This definition is completely flexible, so user can choose any starting year. It can choose any future modeling years, and those do not have to be individual years. Those can be also multi-year steps. Each year inside the model is divided into time slices. Number of time slices, again, during 1 year is completely customizable by user, and these time slices are used to capture the most important variations in terms of demand, especially if you are talking about power system, but also seasonality or availability of certain technologies during the year, also inside the days. We can also capture variation in prices. We are capable to model operation of practically any type of the storage. All these elements, how they will be structured, how many modeling periods, how many time slices during the year, all this really depends on the user, and it is completely up to the user to decide, to analyze based on available data, based on the target of analysis, how to approach this division. Next element is our energy forms. So when I say energy forms, we are not necessarily addressing just energy, but it can be any other commodity, like flow of various types of materials, water, emissions, some auxiliary inputs, outputs that are used to model certain aspects of our energy system. So it is down to user which energy forms will be used, from the resources to the final or end use of energy. These energy forms are then connected through technologies and storages. In terms of the presentation of technologies and storages, again, there is quite a flexible framework. Technology in message practically converts one or several inputs into one or several outputs or energy forms with multiple operational modes. That means multiple ways how this transformation or conversion is done. And those can be fixed operational modes or variable operational modes in terms of connections between inputs and outputs. When I say variable, this is always a linear combination among inputs and outputs. And this approach also allows that we connect practically any or couple any energy sectors with some other sectors like water, hydrogen production, desalination, cogeneration. So there are really numerous ways how to do this, and all these elements are practically completely customizable in message. Each technology is characterized by its technical, economic, and environmental parameters. These are usual parameters that we see in all models: definition of inputs, outputs, efficiencies, lifetime, vintage of equipment. Then some parameters or some characteristics that are important when we are talking about power system modeling. So minimum power or technical minimum, unit sizes, ramp rates, all economical parameters like investments, fixed variable operation costs, operation maintenance costs, fuel costs, penalties, may be related to emissions and so on. We also have a separate module to model storages, and these storages can be of any type, hydro batteries. It is very flexible how this can be done. So we can model continuous storages, daily storages, weekly, seasonally. So it's really up to the user to decide what to model. And another element that is important that was already mentioned, and it is often mentioned in these modeling frameworks, is use of constraints and relations. These are again very flexible and are mainly used to represent various policies and operational requirements at energy system, like emission accounting and costs, taxes, trading in emission certificates, various emission limits, designing emission reduction paths, various types of reserves and flexibility requirements in power systems, incentives, subsidies, some auxiliary modeling features. So sometimes we use these constraints to make model do certain things that we wish to do. All these constraints relations are of very simple formats, upper, lower limits, definition of constraints, who is contributing to constraints, who is limiting constraints. And based on these constraints, model will try to find an optimal solution and identify what would be optimal solution that satisfies all these constraints and assumptions. Message also offers so-called multi-regional modeling framework, and it's capable to keep a record of scenarios and data sets that are related to various scenarios inside the same case study. This multi-regional modeling is something that we use when we have more countries to cooperate, or when inside one country we want to make differentiation among different sub-regions. It is also useful if we are cooperating with several countries, then each country can cooperate on its own model, can develop independent models, and then these models can be put together into multi-regional modeling framework. They can be connected, they can be analyzed as disconnected. And as I said, the last point is also very important, that Message offers framework to deal with scenarios, to run various versions of our case study with various data sets, and it is relatively easy to update sets of data consistently across several scenarios or individually selected scenarios. In terms of investment analysis capabilities of Message, and also maybe some other tools that we are offering, we can model various types of subsidies, incentives, taxes, feed-in tariffs, trading in clean energy certificates or emission certificates, carbon cap and trade, also carbon tax policies. We can also support investment mobilization in terms of assessment of clean energy project revenues, costs, variability of generation. And we also offer other tools that can then bring this one step further and analyze financing options for various technologies. And at the end, what I would like to say, a couple of messages. So Message in the form that we are distributing is a flexible modeling framework with intention to provide insights and support quantification of low carbon and net zero paths, as well as any other path chosen or defined by the user. But Message itself cannot provide all answers. It must be used with other tools that feed into Message or that are using results of the Message. And one part that is also important is the effort that is needed to prepare data for such models. So there are several, let's say, data preparation utilities that must be coupled with Message. This doesn't have to be a firm coupling, but this is also part of our capacity building program, that we teach people, that we show how data should be identified, validated, and then prepared for Message runs. We as the agency offer full support in use and application of Message, as well as other in-house developed tools that are needed to analyze, in general, energy planning options, but in this particular case, net zero paths of the future. As I emphasized on the first day, we are not here to prepare a report for countries or to prepare data, but we will do our best to provide training and demonstrate how this can be done, and we will provide technical assistance that national team can finalize this study. And because today we are looking into several tools, there are a number of other tools that can be found on the market, either free or commercial. But I would say that each model or tool is as good as data assumptions and skills knowledge of user, planner, and analysts are. So if we have a perfect tool, but we do not use it properly, then results of analysis will be at least questionable. Therefore, in order to apply tools correctly, we cannot rely upon only single person. It should be really a combination of people. I believe that beyond all these tools that were presented today, when we are talking about particular case study, there is a large team that is working directly or indirectly to produce data, to prepare data, to run the model, interpret results, and prepare reports. So these are prerequisites for a successful energy planning process. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. And of course, I stay available for questions and comments.
All right, thank you very much, Mario, for this very insightful presentation on the message model. You did point out that, you know, since this is a framework, right, and a lot of models are frameworks that come with no data. There's a lot of work needs to be done on data preparation. So, and you did point out that you can assist with that effort. But I mean, so what's your sense in terms of setting up a national study for a country in terms of getting all the data ready? Because you've worked with many countries over the last 20 years. And you know, so can you give people a sense for how long that might take until you're ready to run a case?
Yeah, so this is different from country to country. That really depends on the level of statistics, not just energy statistics available, but general statistics available in the country. And I would say I've seen some very good examples where we would go that I didn't have maybe much hope, but then quickly, and when I say quickly, that means in 2 weeks we would be able to set up initial case study which would usually address power system. These 2 weeks were usually preceded by 2 weeks of e-learning, because online learning we use for people to familiarize with data sets needed and also with user interface. And then during the training, we are really focused. So we assume that basic data sets are already collected before the training. Of course, there are many other examples where even after third training, we were still struggling to get the data, to get the model produce reliable results, just because we didn't have data, or maybe changes in the national teams were too big to cope with this situation. If I may say, once I participated in really projects that's with targets to produce something that is close to net zero future strategy. That task did not include just message model, included other aspects. And we had a very experienced team. It took us 6 months to produce from the start until we produced and presented documents to the government, to the public, in fact. So for first public consultations. So this is something that is realistic, assuming you have a relatively good team.
And so just one more follow-up question on this. So, you know, thinking back to the presentation that Brent Warner yesterday showed, you know, on a net zero path towards 2050. So it's very clear, you know, that decarbonization in the supply sectors alone is never going to get us there. We have to decarbonize the end use sectors as well. By doing detailed modeling of technology transitions from technologies that we currently use. We all use them, right? I have a gas stove, I have a gas furnace, I have a gasoline-driven car. Eventually, we'll have to electrify a lot of this. And so, you know, in the transportation sector, the household sector, but also in the industrial and residential sector. So, so what's your experience in terms of, you know, getting data, not just for supply, because that's often available, but what's your experience in terms of getting your hands on reasonably good data on the demand sectors to be able to do a decarbonization study? Because again, if we can't model those sectors, it's almost next to impossible to get to that point. And how many good studies have you seen where there was good representation on the supply side, but also good representations, robust representations on the demand side?
Yeah. So usually, so this demand, how we are covering in capacity building, this is a first step where we are trying to assess demand. And I work mostly on the supply side. I would say demand is much more demanding. just there is so much variety, so many details that we have to address, that even in a very well organized countries, you always find, after some time you find, okay, this area we have to expand, this area we have to look into more details. And just this effort that we prepare appropriate demand assessment for supply model is already very demanding. Personally, in message, we can also include these end users. We can include all these potential options to switch among fuels, among technologies. Personally, I'm not in favor of this approach, because I see that demand analysis is much more, I would say, in a linear programming problem, model will always run for the cheapest solution, while in reality this is not happening. So all these tasks that we have to complete just to feed all this data in the model, for me this is a completely separate analysis and can be left out of linear programming model, can be run through scenario approach. And I would say it's quite demanding, and I've seen some very good studies. But knowing, participating in these studies, I also saw that so many data are missing, so many data are estimated, so that the margin for error is really huge. So even in developed countries, not to talk about developing countries where we even do not have idea how energy is consumed, why it is consumed like that, and then how it will be consumed in the future.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm in favor of more scenario approach, where we are looking into more wider spectrum of options and intentionally driving some scenarios to reach some extreme borders.
Very good. So before we move on to the last modeling group, there was just a question on the chat room. Can message do state and regional analysis? I think you pointed out that that's possible, but maybe just confirm that, since the question came up.
Yes, usually we apply it at national level, but it can be applied at sub-national level, and then it can be applied for multi-regional analysis.
Like you did for, like you're doing for IRENA, right, on the Africa project, right?
Yes, yes, okay. Exactly.
Yeah, okay, all right. All right, well, thank you so much, Mario, for this great talk. And at this point, we'll switch to the fourth group on LEAP. And so it's my pleasure to introduce you to the two speakers that will be covering the LEAP model. First one is Charlie Heaps. Charlie is a senior scientist at the Stockholm Environment Institute's Climate and Energy Research Program. He's the designer of, the original designer of the LEAP. I think he's been around just about as long as I have, or perhaps even longer. There's a lot of gray hair that I see there. So he has, you know, he's been active in many countries in LEAP implementations. I think he's, you know, it's apparently thousands of users in over 200 countries worldwide across many different organizations. And so we're really happy to have the opportunity to listen to Charlie. I came across him, I think in the 90s sometimes, when we did a similar activity back then, was called Country Studies Program. So I think that's when I first ran across Charlie. So yeah, he's been in this business for many years. And then I think Charlie will start out the talk, and then I think Nina will also be part of this. And Nina is a principal scientific engineering associate at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Again, one of the 10 national laboratories for the United States Department of Energy that supports the Net Zero World initiative. And so it's my pleasure now to turn it over to both Charlie and Nina. So Charlie, just make sure you unmute yourself and then share your screen and go ahead.
Thanks, Gunther. And yeah, as Gunther pointed out, we're both ancient, but we're still here. So I'm going to start. I hope you can see my screen now. I'm going to start and give a brief introduction to LEAP, maybe sort of 10-15 minutes, and then Nina's going to talk more about applications of LEAP. And Nina and her colleagues are actually sort of one of the leading sort of users of LEAP at the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. So she's going to talk about a couple of applications in China, but I'll get started just sort of introducing LEAP itself. So to begin with, let me just tell you what LEAP is. So it stands for the Low Emissions Analysis Platform. It used to be known, maybe some of you came across it in the past when it was known as the Long Range Energy Analysis Planning System, but we renamed it a couple of years ago. LEAP is a Windows-based tool for energy planning, climate mitigation planning, and sort of air pollution planning as well. And increasingly over time, we've been doing those sort of three things sort of together in an integrated fashion to look at sort of co-benefits of action. LEAP itself has been developed over very many years, over the last 40 years, and it's been developed at the US Center of the Stockholm Environment Institute. I'm not actually the original developer of LEAP, but I have been working on it for more than 30 years. So I'm kind of been the lead developer of it for the last 30 years. As Gunther said, it's been very widely applied. Especially most countries have applied it at one time or another, and many countries have used it to help develop their climate communications, NDCs, BURs, national communications, those kinds of things. But it's also very widely used in sort of both energy ministries and environment ministries. I know the question has come up about scale before. I would say probably maybe 50-60% of LEAP applications are at the national scale, but it has also been very widely used at subnational scales for sort of subnational regional plannings, particularly in countries like Indonesia and China. And it has also been applied at sort of the city scale, both in the US and in various Chinese cities and African cities as well. And more recently, we have been using it quite a bit for sort of multi-country analysis as well. We're in the process of completing an assessment for UNEP that's building an Africa-wide model, but disaggregated down to have sort of national scale resolution for all 54 African countries. LEAP is a scenario-based modeling tool, so it's sort of designed to explore how different aspects of the system might change in the future under alternative policy settings. So typically you'll start by building sort of baseline scenarios and then exploring alternative policy scenarios. It can help you, it cuts across sort of the whole of the energy system. So it looks at both the demand side and the supply side, or as we call it in LEAP, transformation. It looks at both energy and emissions, and it looks at sort of both sort of final demands, primary requirements, resource availability, but it also looks at sort of emissions and investment requirements and things like that. It's primarily focused on the energy sector for now. It does have some somewhat simpler modeling capabilities in non-energy sectors. So you can look at things like the land use change, forestry. It doesn't have detailed modeling of forestry and land use change yet, but we're working on that at the moment, and I'll tell you more about that a bit later on. But maybe what distinguishes LEAP from some of the other models you've heard about at the moment, they have very similar in terms of scope, and it's maybe a bit less sophisticated than some of the other models like times and message, particularly for supply side modeling. But the focus in LEAP is really to sort of take these quite complex tasks that we've been hearing about today and to make them as easy to use as possible. So kind of our target audience, I think, is maybe slightly different from some of the other modeling tools. Maybe the other modeling tools are designed for modelers, whereas we're trying to design something that's hopefully usable by sort of planners, you know, the actual people who sit in energy environment ministries. So we've really put a lot of effort into making LEAP not just a modeling tool, but really sort of a complete decision support system. So there's a lot of emphasis in LEAP on tasks like sort of helping you process data and sort of manage the data that goes into your models, to help you sort of document the data as you're putting it into the model. So there's actually sort of documentation features built into the software, but also to think about tasks like sort of results visualization and stakeholder engagement. So there's, you know, the software itself can actually sort of produce the kind of reports that are understandable by planners and decision makers. And we've really tried to sort of make it speak the language of decision makers and planners. In terms of availability, LEAP itself is it's not open source, but it is available at no charge to governments, non-profits and academics in low income and lower middle income countries. And it's also available at low cost to those kinds of organizations in upper middle income countries. It's also available to students worldwide at no cost. For other types of users, so for people in private companies or for people based in OECD countries, then it's available at slightly higher cost, and we sort of use the revenue from that to be able to support the people that we give it away at no cost to in low income and lower middle income countries. It's regularly updated. We come out with updates multiple times per year, and it's really quite a sort of vibrant user community around it. So there's lots of support available. There's a web forum where people can post questions and get answers. There's a Facebook group. There's a comprehensive set of training materials available, including sort of walkthrough videos that sort of teach you how to use the tool on a separate YouTube channel. You can download the software itself from the address down there at the bottom, leap.sei.org, and you can sort of access all of the resources for LEAP from that same URL, leap.sei.org. So that's sort of the basic sort of aspects of the system. Now, in terms of the structure, and this is probably quite similar to what some of the other folks have been showing earlier on, it's sort of got the main calculations within LEAP sort of running down this sort of spine in the middle of this diagram. So there's a sort of a section where you do demand analysis. It's probably quite strong in terms of its sort of demand analysis. You can do, you know, either quite sort of high level top-down econometric types of analysis, or you can do really very detailed sort of bottom-up end-use oriented demand analysis. And you kind of do that first. So the whole model is demand driven, and it can sort of take inputs which can be exogenous in terms of demographics and macroeconomics, or you can sort of link LEAP to other models that might have, you know, their own macroeconomic modeling going on within them. And actually, I should mention that we're just in the process of releasing a new macroeconomic model that can be linked to LEAP, that's designed to sort of look at sort of building back from COVID and actually looking at different sort of COVID strategies and thinking about what that implies in terms of economic recovery, and that model can be linked to LEAP. So the demand analysis in LEAP, which can be driven by macroeconomics and demographics, basically allows you to calculate sort of the final energy requirements and the implied emissions associated with those requirements. Then there's something called transformation analysis, which is basically very similar to the types of things that you've heard about in Message and Times. It's sort of a reference energy-based system that looks at you know, all of the energy supply and conversion and transmission distribution sectors. So it's looking at things like electric generation, oil refining, coal mining, things like that. But it can also look at sort of traditional sectors, so things like charcoal making, and also, you know, it's sort of agnostic about technologies, so it can look at sort of upcoming sort of modern technologies that might be important for, you know, net zero scenarios, so things like sort of hydrogen production from various different technologies. In particular, it has sort of fairly detailed modeling of the electric generation sector. It can, you know, disaggregate things down into time slices, and it can look at issues like sort of capacity expansion and dispatch and energy storage and things like that. So once you've done your transformation analysis, you end up with sort of requirements for sort of primary energy, and you can then compare those to your sort of resource base. Then there are some other parts of the model as well. There's a part that does integrated cost benefit analysis, where you can study the the costs and benefits of each different scenario you're considering. So it covers sort of a wide area of topics, but you know, the fuel costs, the capital costs, the operating maintenance costs, externality costs. And then there's another part of the system that does the environmental loadings. So that calculates, you know, all of the emissions associated with your system, whether they're greenhouse gases, local air pollutants, short-lived climate pollutants. And then, as I mentioned before, there's a section that also looks at non-energy sector emissions. So things like sort of solid waste, industrial processes, land use change, forestry, those kinds of things. So tying it all together, you can make a sort of comprehensive accounting for all of the sources and sinks of emissions in your whatever country or whatever sector you're modeling. And then I should lastly mention there's one other sort of module linked to LEAP called IBC, the Integrated Benefits Calculator. That takes the emissions coming from LEAP and it's able to translate those into estimates of impacts. So first it sort of calculates population weighted concentrations of pollutants, and then those are used as input to calculate impacts in terms of sort of premature mortality or avoided premature mortality of one scenario versus another. So in terms of the user interface,
Charlie, just a time check. We have about 15 minutes left.
15 minutes, yeah. And I'm going to take about another 5 minutes and then hand over to Nina. Okay, if that's right. So yeah, in terms of the interface, you can get a quick sense of it here. I'll just go through some of the basic elements. So the model itself is structured in terms of different views of an energy system. So you can see those down here. There's an analysis view where you do the modeling, build all the scenarios, enter all the data, create the data structures. There's a results view where you can query all the results. There's an energy balance view which produces standard format energy balances. There's a standard format main menu at the top. The main data is organized into this tree structure. Over here on the right is the place where we actually do the data entry, and there's all sorts of ways of managing the data. And the models are shown as various different tabs on the system. I'm going to rush through this because I don't want to show you too much here. I'm going to run out of time on this, I'm sorry. So in terms of modeling capabilities, I'll just mention a few of these things here, and I'll make these slides available to you later on. But sort of the philosophy in LEAP is to offer sort of a choice of methods based on different, you know, the needs of the model and your data availability. So you can do sort of quite high level top-down econometric type modeling, or you can do very detailed bottom-up end-use type modeling. You can even do sort of stock turnover models that track stocks and sales of data. On the supply side, you can do very simple accounting-based dispatch modeling, or you can even do sort of quite sophisticated least cost optimization of capacity expansion and dispatch. So LEAP is linked to an optimizing framework called NEMO, which is a high-performance open-source optimization framework that we've been developing over the last few years that can work with different solvers, including CPLEX, Gurobi, and CBC, which is an open-source one. And I should mention that LEAP at the moment doesn't do full energy system optimization modeling, but that is coming in a future version of LEAP. We're hoping to release that this year. So at that point, it will have more similar capabilities to something like times and message. I should mention, just like message, all the data structures in LEAP are user editable. It's very flexible in terms of the data structures. And it does include this sort of integrated debugging environment that makes it easy to edit, import, and process data and to visualize results. And it also, I think, quite uniquely includes an application programming interface. So it's possible to link LEAP to other models and to actually write your own software that scripts the use of LEAP and controls how LEAP runs. Maybe one other important thing to mention about the modeling capabilities is that the basic physical accounting calculations are handled internally within LEAP, But additional flexibility comes from LEAP's expression-based data definition language. So it's very much like a spreadsheet in that you can write your own expressions to define data and to create your own additional models on top of the standard modeling that goes on within LEAP. So for example, technology penetration, you could specify exogenously, or you could write your own little sort of mini model saying that, you know, I think the technology of EVs is going to be a function of the price of electricity, the price of gasoline, the price of the vehicles themselves, those kinds of variables. So you can kind of create your own models on top of the standard models defined within LEAP. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm rushing through this so much. In terms of one other thing on modeling capabilities is LEAP's approach to scenarios. So LEAP makes great use of sort of a hierarchy of scenarios. LEAP's expressions, the way that you define the data, are inherited across those hierarchies of scenarios. So that makes it possible to create sort of mini scenarios that look at sort of individual policy measures, but then to plug them together in a very simple way, in a way that you don't need to sort of re-enter data. So for example, you could create an overall strategy as a combination of lots of individual policy measures, and you can see how those measures interact with each other within the sort of integrated planning environment of LEAP. So for example, your measures might reflect the NAMAs, you know, the nationally appropriate mitigation actions, and you can combine those together to create overall integrated scenarios, which might be your LEDs or your net zero scenarios. And what you can see over there on the right is the scenario manager that lets you organize the scenarios and specify sort of the inheritance of the scenarios. So I think I've already mentioned something about the investment analysis capabilities, but LEAP basically is intended for social cost benefit analysis rather than financial analysis. It can perform comprehensive cost benefit analysis across scenarios, and the costs and benefits can be reviewed for individual measures, or they can be reviewed for sort of the overall scenarios compared to each other. And it does take into account a wide number of factors, including sort of capital costs, O&M costs, externality costs, and even sort of costs of unmet energy services. Results can be specified in these sort of standard overall cost benefit summaries, but you can also produce things like marginal abatement cost curves. So the thing on the bottom right there is an example of that. And just in terms of the results visualization, there's a very wide range of interactive results that you can produce. So all these charts I'm showing you actually come straight out of the software. You know, they're not produced afterwards, they're actually produced directly within the software. So for example, you can make sort of bar charts showing results across multiple dimensions. You can create wedge charts showing you the contribution of different measures to achieving your overall policy goals. You can produce gradient maps showing results by country, for example, or by regions within a country. You can produce line graphs that track overall scenario progress, but you can also produce sort of detailed tables showing sectoral, subsectoral, and end-use results. You can produce very detailed results in the electric sector showing sort of sub-annual electric demands or sub-annual generation dispatch, including sort of the role of energy storage. You can produce Sankey diagrams showing sort of energy flows in an energy system, and then more specialized things such as decomposition charts based on sort of the IPAT or Kaya approach, marginal abatement cost curves, and even gridded maps showing current and likely future emission hotspots. And then finally, we've got sort of a standard format energy balance there showing which really sort of reflects the standard way of showing energy statistics, just like the IEA and countries do themselves. I'm going to skip over many of these, but just show you there's lots of different examples of LEAP applications. If you go to the LEAP website, you can see those and other examples as well. I just want to very quickly mention before I hand over to Nina some what we're working on for the future. So we're working on particular highlights there is the energy system optimization modeling. So LEAP is currently restricted to doing optimization modeling for one sector at a time, but we're working on allowing it to do full energy system optimization modeling. We're also working on expanding the land use change and forestry modeling. And we're also working on a new system of internet data links, which will allow data to be pulled in directly from internet databases to make it much easier to get started on data. I'm going to leave it at that to give Nina some time. If you want more information, here's the address for the LEAP website, and from that you can also get to the Facebook and YouTube pages if you want more information. So I'll leave it at that. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you, Charlie. Yep. Okay, just 1 second. I'll share my screen.
So Nina, we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, so you might need to skip maybe.
Okay, sure. Yes, I'll try
I
to.
only went for 20.
Yeah.
So.
No,
It's okay.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
know you have 10 slides.
Yeah, it'll be fast. Thank you. So thank you, Charlie, for that excellent overview of LEAP. And I think with that very informative background, I just want to take a few minutes to introduce 2 specific case studies of how LEAP has been applied to model China, both at a national level and at a subnational level. Oops, sorry. So I'll just talk a little bit about one specific example that was developed at our lab by the China Energy Program for which we call the China 2050 Dream Model. And we initially started developing this model back in 2006 to inform the initial development of China's energy efficiency policies. And this model has been used for both mid to long-term energy outlooks for China, and is pretty specific in terms of it being based on physical nonlinear drivers as well as cross-sector linkages, which I'll go into a little bit more detail later. In terms of how we came about developing this model specifically for China, there were 4 main types of data sources that we use. This includes, for a lot of historical time series, we use publicly available published national statistics. And then for more detailed data inputs for technologies, we looked into published literature. And we also built up our model over the past 16 years with a lot of feedback from in-country sectoral as well as industry experts, and was able to continue to refine and update the model based on previous collaborative modeling projects with Chinese partners. Charlie mentioned a little bit about the scenarios earlier, and we use the model for 2 main types of scenario analysis. This includes economy-wide pathways that encompasses multiple strategies and also captures changes in both activity and technologies. And also, as Charlie mentioned, we did individual policy scenarios that allows us to characterize and model specific policies such as electrification of buildings, or a specific types of measures such as energy efficiency improvement across the transport sector through fuel economy standards. So this diagram just shows one example of the LEAP model structure at a high level that we set up for China. And we can see it encompasses both the energy sector on the top, and we've also done projects where we've looked at non-energy sectors in terms of non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions, such as methane and F-gases. But for the energy sector, which I'll focus primarily on today, we include an energy demand module that captures different activity levels for end-use energy drivers, as well as different end-use technology and fuel mixes. And together, this allows us to use the model to calculate energy demand for specific end uses, as well as to aggregate it at end-use sector levels, such as buildings or transport. And combined with emission factors, then we're able to calculate greenhouse gases for the energy sector. We also model the transformation sector, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And this another diagram kind of illustrates some examples of how the social, economic, and physical drivers interact within our China LEAP-based model, as well as the cross-sector linkages. So of course, the model uses different socioeconomic drivers as shown at the top, but there are also a number of physical drivers that we can see, such as floor area for buildings and per capita vehicle ownership, which can translate into total stock of vehicles. We can see that the physical drivers, such as floor space, also carries through to other sectors, such as industry, because primary driver of heavy energy-intensive industrial products such as aluminum, cement, glass, are some of these physical drivers, such as buildings, urban infrastructure, and in the case of glass and aluminum, aluminum, also vehicles. So there are all these different interactions between the different sectors that are captured through these cross-sectoral linkages. And this slide, I won't go into the details, but just to show you, over the 16 years, the level of detail we've been able to build up in the LEAP model for buildings, which I'll illustrate in a diagram later. But for industry, we currently capture 12 energy-intensive industries, the heavy industries, as well as 18 light manufacturing industries, and also 17 different modes of transport. And for energy transformation, in addition to power generation, we also have detailed modules to simulate the energy that's consumed by specific energy conversion industries, as well as the self-use of energy in those energy supply industries. And so this diagram just highlights, the very multiple layers of detail that can be captured in LEAP for different end use sectors, if the data is available, of course. So for buildings, we have it differentiated by climate zone, as well as different building types. And then we're also able to represent different levels of efficiency for these buildings, whether they're existing buildings with or without retrofits, or new buildings that are built to the current building codes, or are ultra low, near zero energy buildings. And under each of those, there are additional layers of different end uses, as shown on the very right. And so we've used this China Dream model, which is based on LEAP, for many different applications, including mid to long-term national outlooks and pathway analysis that allows us to identify where energy, coal, and CO2 might peak, and the mitigation potential across different sectors or even end uses, and also to conduct impact evaluation of existing or proposed policies. We've also used it for supply side analysis, whether it's for the power sector or even to evaluate the potential of shale gas development in China, and also done some analysis looking at environmental and co-benefits analysis between air pollutants and energy efficiency. And this is just an example of some of the results that can be generated using LEAP, using different scenarios where you can compare the impact on total CO2 emissions by different scenarios and see where the peak might occur, as well as use those mini scenarios that Charlie mentioned to kind of tease out the individual CO2 emission impact of specific strategy and to compare it against each other. And just lastly, maybe in a minute or two, I'll just mention that we've also used LEAP for developing a China provincial model. And really this is in order to do a mid to long-term model for a single province or a city. And using LEAP to do this has some specific capabilities and applications at the subnational level, such as developing a local greenhouse gas inventory and helping a local province or city do this baseline generation of energy and emission projections, as well as develop different scenarios that may be particularly relevant for the subnational level, and also to evaluate the impact of different policies at the subnational level. And for example, we've used LEAP to help Chinese cities develop their low carbon action plans in the past. And because it is at the provincial or a city level, the model structure is much more simplified due to data. So this is just one example of a very simplified provincial model structure that we had developed, where you see it's not as detailed as the national model, but still can represent different sectors and end use, and it has the same capabilities as the national level model for generating scenarios and policy impact analysis. And so with that, I'll just close. And I think both Charlie and I are happy to take questions if there's time.
Great, super. Thank you so much, Nina and Charlie. It's great to see how far you guys have come in 30 or 40 years of this model under development. Let's see, there's one, I see one question in the chat. We can take a question. So does your approach allow for technology evolution? How is that incorporated into the cross-sector interactions?
Sure, I'll be happy to, maybe I'll take a stab at it, and then Charlie, please feel free to jump in as well. So yes, sure. I think at least for the China modeling approach, we've definitely can capture technology evolution in several different ways. So for example, with efficiency improvement expected for technologies, whether it's autonomous improvement or more accelerated improvement driven by policy, we can capture that in the model by changing the energy intensity for a specific technology. So that's one example. And another example is for things like electrification or fuel switching. As countries develop, in the case of China, we've seen this happen. There's a fuel transition that happens as they move away, for example, in rural households from biomass to gas to hopefully eventually to clean electricity. We can also capture that evolution by changing the fuel shares of the different technologies for that given subsector. So those are some examples.
Charlie, did you want to add something to this?
Well, maybe it's just in terms of how you go about modeling those things, like kind of kind of the philosophy in LEAP is to give people sort of choice of methodologies. So you can develop your own little model of how technology evolution happens. Or very often what we're doing in a country is you're actually doing it by expert elicitation or stakeholder engagement. So you're coming up with some rough idea about what is reasonable penetration rates for different technologies, and then you're gathering together a group of experts and saying, do you think this is reasonable or not? So that's in many ways quite an effective way of doing it, especially in sort of developing countries where there's a lot of expertise on the ground, but the data is not so great. With that, we've been doing that in the Caribbean recently, for example. We come up with a number and then you say, is this something you think you can achieve or not? So there's quite a lot of flexibility in how you do that kind of thing.
Super. All right. Well, let me thank all of our model speakers this morning. I'm super excited about what I heard. I mean, probably what you might want to take away from this session is, these are only 4 of the models that are out there. There's others as well, but these are some of the more commonly used tools. And you've heard that all of these have been around for decades, right? 30, 40, 50 years. They've been under development for a long time. They all have a very large user base. They all have a large development base with ongoing updates. And so, there's a large network of experts that you can tap into for any one of those tools if you pick one of those and you want to implement them. So I think you can't go wrong with any one of those models, right? So it comes back to perhaps your personal choice or what you already have experience with. But there's no wrong model. These are all great models, highly established, validated, continually updated. Again, large community of users that you can tap into for support, a large number of experts, modelers that can help you out if you run into challenges. And so I think this was really great to hear all of that. And so at this point, I'd like to thank everyone on the call this morning, all the speakers. For preparing this, and I'll hand it over to Clarice now for a moment.
Yeah, Günther, sorry, I just want to point out there were a couple of additional questions in the chat.
Okay, I missed them. Okay, all right. Okay.
We have a few questions from Chile. So
okay, you want to read them off because
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, I will do so. So the first question is for the LEAP speakers, and then there's another question that can be really addressed by all of the speakers today. So first question is, what have been the main challenges you have had in the development of LEAP Dream? So yeah, Nina and Charlie, if you want to take that, then I can read off the next question.
Sure. Yeah, I can take a stab really quickly. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we started developing the LEAP Dream model in 2006 and really continued to develop and expand it over the years. So the initial data availability is definitely a challenge we face. But I think, as Charlie mentioned, kind of in working with the in-country partners and experts, we've been able to kind of overcome that. And I think over time, as our model has gotten more and more complex, as you see from the diagrams, continuing to keep the model updated and also continuing to update the calibration are other kind of ongoing challenges that we are overcoming with, continuing to look for new literature or working with in-country partners through many different projects in order to make sure that the model stays current and reflecting the latest trends.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, so this is for all the speakers. How do you obtain your data regarding, for example, end uses of energy and different types of commercial buildings in different thermal zones, surveys, administrative data, and so forth. So yeah, Nina and Charlie, since you're on already, why don't you get us started on that?
Yeah, I mean, I could say, I mean, that's really the $1 million question, that one, which is, and it's really sort of, you're triangulating between different data sources. You'll never find one place that has all the data you need in one place. It's sort of, I wish it was like that, but it's not. So usually what you're doing is, you know, you've got some high level energy statistics, hopefully for most countries. So that gives you something that you're aiming towards getting your model to produce. But then you need to go off and look it down in the different sectors, subsectors, and end uses to see what's available. And sometimes you'll have good data available. You might have data available on sort of number of vehicles or different number of buildings of different types. You know, if you're lucky, you'll find that kind of data. You probably won't find good data on energy intensities and things like that. So you maybe have to go and look at the international data sources for that. If you're really lucky and you've got enough budget, you might be able to do some targeted surveys to actually get some better data in country as well. And then you're just putting all those things together and trying to have your model sort of initially produce something that roughly matches your high level statistics. And that's just to get the base of your data right, you know, and thereafter, then you're going to be making projections of how you think your technology penetration rates might evolve over time into the future. So that's kind of the job that the model has to do, but you have to pick data from all sorts of different places and just sort of put it together in an intelligent way. And I'm sure there's lots of people on this call who can help with that. So that's the good news.
Clarice, I would just add, I mean, I agree with everything Charlie has said. That's absolutely how we go about it. And what the approach we've come to use in Times over the years is to really see the model and the data as evolving literally, iteratively, and informing each other. So we start by just taking country energy balances, which report the amount of fuel consumed in each sector. So taking the example from the question, the commercial sector, and making assumptions that we know are consistent with the region of the world that we're in, to how much of that is going to heating, cooling, lighting, and so on. And we have checks in the interface for looking at the intensities of use that implies. So we can see that we're roughly in a reasonable ballpark. And we do that for all of the end uses. So we start by building a starting point that's reasonable based on the data that we do have. And then we use the model to tell us where would the highest value for obtaining additional data be. If we see that heating in the commercial sector is playing a big role in our strategies, then that may be an area where we really need to go and dig further into the data. If we have data readily available, obviously we plug it in, but we can also use the model as a tool to prioritize new data collection or work with existing data to better inform it. So, you know, we really try to not have data availability be a hurdle to starting to use the model, but really use the model to let us know where is there a high value for data improvement.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Evelyn. Gunter, we have two more questions here, if I may take a few minutes for that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'd like to invite the speakers, all the speakers today, to turn on their cameras, and in fact, and please feel free to comment on these. So this question is from Egypt, is there an example of the action plan as an output from the different modeling softwares? And this is for all of the presenters today.
I can take a first step there. So I think like for GCAM, we actually have thousands of variables, like the model is publicly available. So if you download the model, you'll be able to see the results and using model interface. But in general, it's basically have detailed representation for energy consumption, demand supply side by technology, by fuel, and prices for like electricity, coal, oil, gas, for each of the region, and also like for wheat, corn, like different commodity price, aluminum, iron, steel, all this kind of price signals for each of the technology and sectors, and they're all regional specific. And so it's probably like a range, and also like carbon prices, emission for CO2, non-CO2 greenhouse gases, and air pollutant emissions. And we can also look into mortality rate using broader GCAM ecosystem. So I would encourage the user, or we can send additional instruction on how to download the model or run the model, provide like specific output you can check yourself.
Sounds great. Yeah, and a reminder that the speakers' contact info will be shared, so additional questions can be sent to the speakers. Yep, and then there was an additional question regarding modeling tools that are specifically designed for archipelago countries like Indonesia. I see it's been addressed online. So yep, LEAP is widely used in Indonesia, and it's also one of the default GCAM regions. And I see now Times also has a starter model for Indonesia. Okay. And so do the other speakers have anything they would like to add at this point to any of the questions that have been addressed? Okay, if not, then we would really like to thank all of the excellent speakers today. Thank you so much for your time. And we will close out the session and go straight to the next session. So I see Nan is here. So this last session will really just be a few minutes where we will discuss how we hope to follow up with all of you, and some closing comments and wrap up instructions on course materials and so forth. So Nan, if you could please start us off.
Sure. Okay, we have had a very productive and informative discussion in the last 3 days. And I hope you all have enjoyed it and learned a lot as much as I did. This is just the beginning of our collaboration, and we hope to work with you more closely in the coming months, leading up to COP27, and further deepen our peer-to-peer exchange and partnerships. So the slide shows the timeline for the year. I don't know, Claire, are you putting it up or should I?
Sure, I would be happy to share my screen on. Just give me one moment, please. Yeah. Okay. Apologies. So hopefully the text is visible. Do I go?
Yeah, so this shows really a timeline and for this collaboration in the coming months running up to COP27. Hope you can see it. Right after this workshop, and you just participate in, we plan to reach out to you to conduct one-on-one discussions on modeling challenges and gaps you may be facing. For example, in data, I heard a lot of questions about that. And methodology, I also heard a lot of questions related to the methods we use, and to form a working group that can continue this technical exchange through monthly webinars that Clarice and I will host, where topics will be decided based on your interests. So it could be around the data, could be about the methodology, or it could be by the different sectors, such as buildings, industry, transport, or power, or other energy, water. And so we will address these different challenges by working with you and with experts and with your team and in the coming 3-4 months. Then in September, we will have 2-week in-person workshop at Argonne National Lab, and just outside of Chicago in the US. If you haven't been there, Chicago is beautiful, and in September, where we will review the results of our collaboration, discuss how these results could be used to inform national policymaking, and also have hands-on training component that will be determined by really all of your interests. And we'll aim to have improved net zero energy system pathways based on the model results for COP27. So those are the proposed steps for continuing this great collaboration that has just begun with the first Net Zero World International Modeling Workshop. So now let me turn it over to Clarisse, and then we'll stop to take any questions. And so Clarisse, and you can take it from here.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Nan, for laying out the vision for an exciting collaboration path. Let me, sorry, there's a lot of windows open. So, okay, so let me just make a few comments on the mechanics of how these follow-up events would take place. And then if participants have any questions, please enter them into the chat and we'll take them at the, in a few minutes. So in terms of how this engagement would occur, we plan to reach out over the next few weeks to workshop participants from the Net Zero World partner countries to check their interest and availability in participating in a brief meeting with Nan, myself, and a few others from Net Zero World to discuss technical areas of interest and develop some ideas for collaboration. And then after that, we would have monthly webinars around the topics of interest. And for these webinars, all the countries that are present here would be invited to join. We would continue to stay in touch through these monthly meetings and hopefully have some progress and results to review together, as Nan mentioned, before the next COP event. And in between, you will receive some communication from us about the September workshop. Just letting you know in advance that registration needs to happen 3 months in advance due to the time it takes to process visas. And I think Gunter will talk more about the details. So please keep an eye out for these future communications. Let me just pause here and check if there were any questions about, okay. So I'm not seeing questions in the chat regarding follow-up. I see a lot of discussion is continuing to happen about the modeling presentation. So thank you for all of you for your interest. What I'd like to do right now is ask Ron Benioff, the Executive Director of Net Zero World, if he would like to make any comments.
Thank you, Clarisse, and really my hat's off to everybody that's participated in this workshop. It's been a very informative and rich and enlightening exchange, and I think a great launch of our multi-year collaboration together with the countries and across experts and institutions. So very excited by the dialogue here and the future prospects for our cooperation. And I want to thank the countries, presenters, and officials and experts. We learned a tremendous amount from your presentations about the pathways that you're developing and have established, as well as the modeling and analytic approaches and needs you're taking, and really inspiring to see the leadership around the world and how we're all coming together to tackle our common challenges related to development and decarbonization and economic growth. Similarly, the presentations on the different modeling tools, I think were very enlightening, and it's wonderful to see the progress that's been made by all of the different models in improving their representation and the design of the models, but also in their ability to be very adaptable and flexible and to be responsive to users and have platforms for in-depth exchange and the opportunity really for multiple tools to the extent possible to be applied in countries to really answer the critical questions that you're facing. And thank you to all the presenters and all the collaborators that we'll be working with going forward. And of course, a huge thank you to Argonne National Labs, especially to Clarisse Kim and Gunter Councilman, who have really done an outstanding job in leading this workshop. And Clarisse, especially, thank you. You've gone way above and beyond in all your efforts to organize this event and corral us all and keep us focused and productive. And thank you. You've done a tremendous job, and really excited to work with you and Nan and the rest of the team going forward. I wanted to also note how excited we are for the discussions that Nan and Clarice identified next with the countries. This will really allow us to get into an in-depth dialogue with you on what you see as the primary areas where Net Zero World can have the greatest value. How can we work together with you to overcome the data challenges that you're facing? How can we help improve the tools that you're using and develop adaptations but also how can we do capacity building so that you and other experts in your countries have further capabilities and access to the right tools and data to support your energy transition planning. So please, I encourage you to be ready for those discussions that will start as soon as next week with your questions, with your requests for assistance, with your suggestions on capacity building activities that we can undertake together with you, and also how this whole community can learn from each other and collaborate across countries. So we're excited, and in those dialogues, feel free to bring in other experts from your countries that may not have been able to participate today. And overall, we very much welcome your guidance and suggestions how this overall Net Zero World initiative can have the greatest value in supporting clean energy transitions in your countries and accelerating progress together, and serving as a model to inspire other countries and regions to undertake similarly ambitious actions. So please reach out to us, let us know how we can assist you, and really looking forward to our path together over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. Yes, this is so exciting. And let me just express my very deep appreciation to all the participants and speakers. You have made this event successful with all your valuable contributions. So I really thank you and hope to see you again soon. Let me turn it over to Günther now to announce some important information to close out the course.
All right. Let's see, can you see the full screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
See the full screen? All right, okay. Well, thank you, Ron, and thank you, everyone. I think we had a really exciting event. Here's how we started out at the very beginning. We may or may not have captured everyone on this, but we tried to do this. So it's really been a super exciting workshop, I think. And really there was a lot of work that went into this. And so first, of course, I want to thank all of you to take the time out of all of your schedule across 12 time zones, halfway around the world, to really join us for these last 3 days to really explore, to first get a status update, get updated on the latest model developments, and get a sense for what modeling tools are available, and perhaps get a sense for how those tools can help you going forward, and perhaps how the Net Zero World Initiative can assist you going forward. And that's, of course, going to be a lot more ongoing discussion that's Ron and Nan and Clarice just elaborated. So a big shout out goes to our 5 country presenters. They really stepped up. I know we harassed you quite a bit to get these presentations ready. I'm pretty sure you got tired of receiving emails from Clarice and me and others, and you've done an amazing job on short notice on the tight schedules. And so I really want to applaud all of you and give you a big shout out for doing what you did and really being ready and share your experience and knowledge with the rest of this the workshop. So thank you so much for doing this. We highly appreciate it. Then of course we had a whole bunch of speakers, right? And so I also want to thank the speakers, because it takes time to prepare for this too. So we started out with Paul, welcoming everyone, continued on with Maria from the Department of Energy, and then Henri from the IAEA. And then, of course, Ron set the stage, introduced an initiative, and Mario sort of introduced us to the IAEA's technical capacity building activities. And then we had Brent, a really exciting, cool presentation from Brent, just giving us a sense for how huge the challenge is to go from where we are right now to where we need to be to reach a net zero world in not under 30 years, not even 30 years, it's under 30 years now, right? So it's amazing, you know, the challenge that's ahead of us. And so we got a lot of work to do, I can tell you. And then, of course, we had Todd setting the stage for today's modeling session, which is giving us a higher level summary and overview of what models can do, what they can do, what the challenges are, and a higher level comparison of the different types of models that are out there. And then, of course, today we had Sha and Evelyn and Nina and Charlie, and again, Mario present the different tools. And so it was, thank you all for all the hard work to prepare the presentations and the materials that we all were able to share with the participants. I highly appreciate that effort too. And then, of course, a big shout out to our facilitators that facilitated the country presentation sessions, Meredith Evans and Sadie Cox did a marvelous job and guiding you through the country presentation. And of course, Nan and Clarice facilitating the other sessions than today's session. And yes, Clarice did an enormous job, you know, keeping me straight, on target and on schedule, and herding the cats. Outstanding job. Thank you all for pitching in and making this work. And then, of course, the people you have not met and have not seen, but those are the people who really work behind the scenes to make this happen and make this a success. These are the people who send you lots of emails about registration, about materials, and you'll get more emails from them. So don't worry, they won't leave your life yet. Okay, but I want to acknowledge all of them because without them, we would have not been able to make this workshop work. They worked really hard to meet tight deadlines and you know and went above and beyond to really help us succeed. So thank you so much to all of you in the IAEA program at RDOT. And then, of course, I also want to highlight the people who actually paid for this workshop. So I want to shout out, I send a shout out to the State Department, and it's the IAEA programs that actually paid for some of our time to put this together. And so this is highly appreciated. And so it's really a cross collaboration. The State Department is part of the initiative. So this was wonderful to see that we could tap into this resource and then connect up with the IAEA and Khanna and the Net Zero World Action Center and all the resources that Ron's Action Center has at its disposal to really launch this event and make this a success. So going forward, what you can expect is we'll be sending out a certificate that sort of will just tell you that, hey, you know, we certify that you attended this workshop. So expect an email from us on this in the very near future. We will also make all the workshop material available at this website that's in here, and you know, there's going to be a passcode. And we will send you an email once the material is ready to download, because we're still finalizing some materials and we have to convert to PDF. So this will likely go out next week sometime. And so we don't have to remember this link. We'll just send an email with the link. You just click on the link. You'll be able to download all the materials. And then, of course, we will pretty much in a minute now, and the next minute or so, we will send out an email for an evaluation. So this is sort of like, you know, we'd like to get feedback on a course because we want to do better next time around. So it won't take long. It will just take a minute or two. There's a few questions for all of you in that evaluation form. It'll be an email with a link. You click on the link and you have a few questions that you can answer, and any feedback is welcome. Because again, this will tell us, did we do well, and where could we improve? Where could we do better next time around? So highly appreciate you just taking a minute or two after this workshop to answer those questions. Appreciate that. And then, of course, lastly, just like Nan said, Chicago in September is a beautiful city. So we look forward to seeing you in September at this in-person workshop. It's for 2 weeks in person, September 12th to 23rd. We're processing the paperwork to get this approved. So that's already being processed. Again, it will be a joint workshop between the Net Zero World Action Center, the IAEA in Vienna, as well as the State Department and all the other organizations that are involved in the initiative. And we are working on the agenda. So as soon as we have an agenda to share, we will send that out too. So stay tuned on that. Yes, so since this is an in-person workshop, I know some of you were not quite meeting the original deadline for registrations. So that was okay because we could last minute, still process some of those even with a few days left before the workshop. However, for this one, it's going to be a much tighter timeline because you will all need visas to come to the U.S., to travel to the U.S. So that's something that's outside of our control. So we probably will reach out to everyone, not in a not too distant future, sort of announcing the workshop and basically inviting you to consider joining this workshop because we have a long lead time for this, just because visa processing times can be sometimes up to several months. So stay tuned on this. And so with this, I'd like to officially now close out the workshop. Again, thank you all for joining us. This was really exciting event to see you all, and I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully soon, in one of the monthly webinars that Nan and Clarice are organizing together with the rest of the team, as well as in September in Chicago. So thank you all and goodbye, and hopefully see you in the near future again.
And thank you so much, Günther. For anyone who's still online, I just want to mention quickly that the second workshop, since it's in person, all of the expenses will be covered, but there is a limitation on the number of participants we can accept due to the physical limitations. So yeah, it will be about 20 people in the next workshop. In this one, we had 80. But, yep. So just want to mention that for folks.
Yeah, I think the actual the physical limit I think is around 30 to 35. So we can accommodate part of that. So anyway, so stay tuned for more announcements. And again, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.